Madhya Lila, chapter 20, text 126 to 127. So I think 127 is on the board. I'm trying to read 126 because usually, the CC verses is sometimes not so easy for me. I just read word by word. Krishna Madhurya Sevananda Prapitra Karana Krishna Sevakare Ara Krishna Rasa Asvadana. You can read word by word. Krishna Madhurya, of an intimate relationship with Krishna. Seva Ananda, of pleasure from rendering service unto him. Praptira, of achievement. Karana, because. Krishna Sevakare, one renders service to Krishna. Ara, and Krishna Rasa, of the mellows of such service. Asvadana, tasting. Translation: when one attains the transcendental bliss of an intimate relationship with Krishna, he renders service to him and tastes the mellows of Krishna consciousness. So now we are 127. Can someone help me out with how to sing that verse? Okay, also Ihate Trishtan, or like Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridrera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridrera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare. Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridhera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridrera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare. Vaishnavis? Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridrera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare. Ihate Trishtanta Yaiche Daridrera Ghare Sarvagya Asi Dukha Dekhi Bhuchaye Tahare. Ihate, in this connection, Drishtanta, the parable, Yaiche, just as, Daridrera Ghare, in the house of a poor man, Sarvagya, an astrologer, Asi, coming, Dukkha, distressed, distressed condition, sorry. Dekhi, seeing, Puchayetahare, inquires from him. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The following parable may be given. Once a learned astrologer came to the house of a poor man and, seeing his distressed condition, questioned him. Purport. Sometimes we go to an astrologer or palmist when we are in a distressed condition or when we want to know the future. The living entity and conditioned life always distressed by the threefold miseries of material existence, or is always distressed. Under the circumstances, he is inquisitive about his position. For instance, Sanatana Goswami approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to ask why he was in a distressed condition. This is the position of all conditioned souls. We are always in a distressed condition, and an intelligent man naturally becomes inquisitive. This position is called Brahma Jigyasa, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, Vedanta Sutra 111. Brahma here refers to the Vedic literature. One should consult the Vedic literature to know why the conditioned soul is always in a distressed condition. The Vedic literatures are meant to free the conditioned soul from the miserable conditions of material existence. In this chapter, the story of the astrologer, Sarvagya, and the poor man is very instructive. I'm going to read just the next verse. Tumi kene dhuki tumara acho, tumi kene dhuki tumara ache pitridhana, tomare na kahila anyatra chadila jivana. The astrologer asked, "Why are you unhappy? Your father was very wealthy, but he did not disclose his wealth to you because he died elsewhere." And just the next verse, because there's also no purpose. Sarvagyaya vakye kare dhanera udeshe, aichiveda purana jivi Krishna upadeshe. Just as the words of the astrologer Sarvagya gave news of the poor man's treasure, the Vedic literatures advise one about Krishna consciousness when one is inquisitive to know why he is in distressed material condition. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svavarantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagishayasya Vadhane Lakshmiryasya Chavakshasi Yasya Dheridaye Samvit Tam Narasimham Maham Bhaje Pralada Hridayaladam Bhakta Vitya Vidaram Sharatindurajim Vande Pavindra Vandanam Harim. So the first shloka again. When one attains the transcendental bliss of an intimate relationship with Krishna, he renders service to him and tastes the mellows of Krishna consciousness. So we are here in the middle of how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs Sanatana Goswami. So there's a whole big conversation. And I want to particularly address this verse, 126, where it is about attaining a transcendental bliss, or attaining the transcendental bliss that comes with attaining intimate relationship with Krishna. And also addressing a bit the parable that is mentioned here with the astrologer who brought the great news to the conditioned soul, who lived in a consciousness of scarcity. I lack this and this, I don't have, I'm distressed with so many things. But he gave the message, actually you are living in abundance, you have a rich father. So this metaphor we hear often. It is used to create awareness that the suffering or the scarcity that we experience is an unnecessary mentality that is based on a lack of connection or a lack of consciousness that we are actually part of the most rich and abundant and secure person that is, which is God. So that we have a problem of unawareness, so to speak. So that would be the core message. The relationship with Krishna, to be attained, intimate relationship with Krishna, is actually our core theme in our practice of Krishna consciousness. At the end, what shall be the result? and when we have a lifetime of service rendered to the mission, to the deities, a lifetime of studying Shastra, a lifetime of chanting Hare Krishna mantra, either on japa and then also performing kirtan. So at the end, one might say, yes, more service, but what does that mean? It means in the relationship with Krishna in a liberated state, having regained one's spiritual identity, one's swarup, one's natural position. Srila Prabhupada stresses this in so many places, saying that this is the perfection of life. And it makes sense if we teach everyone, you are not this body, you are a soul. And then also the scriptures elaborate on what is this soul, what is the swarup of the soul, the relationship it has with Krishna. Then yes, it makes sense to really also absorb oneself or hear and meditate on what the scriptures say about that. Because ultimately, if I want to arrive somewhere, also here, if I would now make a travel plan of I want to discover Switzerland, so I need a map, I need some knowledge, get familiar with public transport system, and perhaps I want to know a bit how people tick and how they speak and what they do in order to know what expects me. So you inform yourself when you go somewhere, unless you want to be surprised, of course, and let's go there and check out when I'm there. But the scriptures want to inspire us to develop a strong and intense desire to return to the spiritual world. So there are so many descriptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam of the spiritual world in the 3rd canto. When Brahma sees Lakshmi Narayan, or when the 4 Kumaras enter Vaikuntha, there are so many beautiful descriptions of how the spiritual world looks like and how the inhabitants of the spiritual world are and what's happening in relationship to Krishna. And we are led gradually to this understanding. Scriptures do not just right there start telling you about your swarup or your intimate relationship with Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada, for example, mentioned this already in the introduction to the Bhagavad-Gita. So we understand the Bhagavad-Gita is Prabhupada called it the standard book of transcendental knowledge, the basic study, 5 main topics: soul, God, material nature, karma, and time. So, and there's not explicitly mentioned what is rasa. Krishna speaks about, of course, what is transcendent, what is it that we have a relationship with him, but it's more general. It's not elaborated. But Srila Prabhupada in the purport already right in the beginning mentions that there are 5 main rasas. And even if he does not elaborate, he makes clear one should be aware that there are these rasas, even if you're in the beginning stage. And then we are supposed to first go through the Srimad Bhagavatam and carefully study the topics. It's called postgraduate in relationship to the Bhagavad-Gita. And what we read here, actually, Caitanya-caritāmṛta, is an even more advanced scripture, because here it's really about the intimate pastimes of Krishna, particularly the Madhya Ras and so on. So we have this hierarchy, and one is supposed to gradually develop through the stages by, of course, studying and practicing Krishna consciousness according to the directions of the acharyas of Srila Prabhupada. And I would like to start with the Bhagavad-Gita in terms of the relationship that is mentioned here, intimate relationship with Krishna, and rendering service to him and tasting the matters of Krishna consciousness. I mean, we know that Arjuna, the person Krishna speaks the Bhagavad-Gita to, is such a personality who has a very intimate relationship, which is called Sakhya, or we say friendship, but if you read the Nectar of Devotion, there's fraternal love, which means brotherly. That the friendship seems to relate to particularly those devotees who are in a kind of male shape and have friendship with him, at least this is the English translation that is given there. And Krishna makes clear why he speaks about Gita to Arjuna is because of that relationship. Of course, there are different purposes. The general public is being taught about transcendental subject matters. But he says 3 times in the Bhagavad-Gita that he speaks this transcendental knowledge to Arjuna because they have an intimate friendship. He starts in chapter 4 with the 3rd verse saying, Saevayam maya tetya yoga prakta puratanaha bhakto sime sakha chiti rahasyam hi itat uttamam. He says that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is told by me to you today, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of the science. So this is how he starts in the 4th chapter, making clear, I tell this to you because you are my intimate friend and my devotee. And here exactly, Bhaktu sime sakha chiti. So this is the statement. So we have an intimate relationship, we are really close, so therefore this qualifies you to hear that, what I have to say, or like not even just hearing that, he says to understand. This qualifies you to understand. Because he says this is this transcendental mystery, the transcendental mystery of that science, of this science. So he calls it a science, first of all, or like this is a translation. And it's a mystery not everyone can enter, and it remains often like, mysterious. It's not revealed to us. So he says the devotee, being a devotee, becoming a devotee, and having ultimately friendship with Krishna qualifies. Then in the 9th chapter, he also says, right at the beginning in the 1st verse, my dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. So this verse also relates to what we heard just here in the purport, where Srila Prabhupada speaks of the miseries every conditioned soul is being exposed to, and that actually the remedy is transcendental knowledge in terms of becoming conscious of the spiritual reality of the self and Krishna and so on. So, and here he points out one quality that is like what makes true friendship, that there is non-enviousness. If I'm truly the friend and well-wisher and of someone, then I'm not envious. Then I'm on the contrary, I want this person to develop and to, or whatever, like be in abundance and successful. And even if this person has more than me or like advantages and opportunities I don't have, I'm granting. I'm not like thinking, damn, why is he or she getting that or this? So that will also be something we can consider, which is what is friendship about. That you become a supporter also of someone. There's of course naturally affection and a bond, and you have each other's back, so to speak. When we talk about friendship, right? And then in the 18th chapter, again Krishna points this relationship and why he is therefore telling Arjuna this knowledge. In 1864 he says, because you are my very dear friend, I'm speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear it is for me, for it is for your benefit. So here the translation is, because you are my very dear friend. And we also hear from the Pandavas, they are all in this Sakhya rasa, in this brotherly love. Arjuna is supposed to be said to be the most intimately united with Krishna. And Krishna makes it clear. So this relationship is very crucial for that the Bhagavad-Gita was spoken to Arjuna. But when we speak here of the friendship, we don't talk of a friendship that happens as long as one, or can happen as long as one is on the material platform. Also in the purports, or when we read the Nectar of Devotion, it becomes clear. This Sakhya rasa, or any type of rasa, happens on the liberated platform. As long as one is in a material consciousness, one cannot have that relationship with Krishna. This is something, also Arjuna is not a material being, so to speak. He's intimately united on the transcendental platform. And this liberated state is also pointed out by Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita in 1854. He says, Brahma Bhuta prasanatma nasochati na kankchati samas sarveshu bhutishu mad bhaktim labate param. He says, Brahma Bhuta is this level, or like the stage where one is in transcendence, where one realizes one's spiritual nature. And prasana atma means that the living entity is free from the influence of the three modes of nature. And if this happens, one can see oneself clearly as the spirit soul one is. And then it's described, na sochati, na kanchati, then there's no hankering, no lamenting, because there's no identification anymore with matter. There's identification with spirit. And one understands the complete unnecessity, oh, is this a word? No, how it is unnecessary to have anything material. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu, one has an equal vision. One sees everyone based on that transcendental consciousness as a spiritual soul or spirit soul. And then Krishna says, Mad bhaktim labate param. From there one attains pure devotional service to me. And he points out, yes, this is the basis. In order, this pure devotional service, which also relates to having relationship with Krishna on a transcendental platform, requires the liberated state. No rasa is possible, like to an extent, like that we are, as long as we are in the influenced by the three modes of material nature. But being in transcendence, or like having attained this Brahma-bhuta, does not equal that one automatically develops a relationship with Krishna. One can become a so-called impersonalist, just staying with that oneness experience, or like this liberation experience of being a spirit and feeling united with everything. So it's not necessarily that you automatically go there to develop a relationship with Krishna. And the nectar of devotion explains that when the rasas are mentioned. First, of course, we have the so-called the Shanta rasa. We can perhaps imagine that this transcendental level is like kind of a crossroad where you got to maybe decide to one degree where you want to go in a personalism or impersonalism. But also, if you take such a metaphor, we could mean if someone picks you up on a certain road, that would be the pure devotee. Then you can go toward relationship with Krishna. This is mentioned in the explanations of Srila Prabhupada, that he says, and someone who is Brahman realized, or like has this tendency, and can only by the influence of a pure Vaishnava develop a relationship with Krishna. Otherwise not, they will just remain with their impersonal conceptions. Shantaras is translated as neutral love, which is a term I often think about, like what is neutral love? It seems to be kind of a bit mutually exclusive. If I'm neutral, am I loving? You know, or it's like Switzerland in politics. Everyone always mentions Switzerland when it's about neutral. You know, they don't take sides. And it's also mentioned how someone on that level is not particularly averse to the demons, not particularly inclined to the devotees. But neutral does not mean indifferent. Sometimes this is for me like my word conditioning of neutral means kind of somewhat perhaps indifferent, not really interested, neutral. But actually it means rather like if the explanations go, if you read a bit through the chapters with the rasas, it's also there's no sense of possessiveness. In higher rasas, the devotees experience a sense of possessiveness toward Krishna. Either they say also, or saying also, I'm yours, and or friends, Krishna is one of us, up to the gopis rather claiming Krishna, you are ours. Like so, there's always a sense like some kind of partiality, we could call it, in a sense that they have a feeling of possessiveness. And that's also what Krishna is enjoying. Like also when you have friends, when we check on a material platform, and you see that if your friends who really therefore support us, like be on our side, we enjoy that, and this gives us a good feeling, makes us feel safe, makes us feel supported, and so on. And in the explanations it is said Shanta would mean saintly, and Srila Prabhupada gives quite some space to explain in the Shantaras what does saintly mean. So Shantaras, and I'm going to read a bit of it. First of all, Shantaras does not mean impersonalism. That's sometimes a conception some also devotees might have out of some reason, and it's just completely a oxymoron, because you cannot have a rasa which relates to Krishna and at the same time being in a state of mind where you do not acknowledge that there is any Krishna. So Shantarasa has nothing to do with being impersonal. Impersonalist is kind of on the transcendental platform and can move toward Shantarasa. That would be the understanding. And Krishna says here, it's a quote, Lord Krishna personally instructs Uddhava like this: the state of being established in my personal form is called Shantarasa, and that relates to the four-armed Vishnu form. And without being situated in this position, no one can advance to actual pure devotional service. End of quote. In other words, no one can be situated in the personal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without being situated at least in Shantarasa. In the discussion of the Acharyas, Srila Prabhupada mentions how some do not acknowledge Shantarasa as an actual rasa. For the exact reasons I don't know, but it said that Shukadev, Rupa Goswami asserts that even if we accept that argument, still we must accept Shantarasa at least as the basis of any rasa or the foundational state. And here Srila Prabhupada makes also a clear statement that this is a level one is supposed to attain. And he also points out the stage of Shantarasa can be attained by the impersonalist only when they are in association with pure devotees. Otherwise, it is not possible. After Brahman realization, when a liberated soul comes in contact with a pure devotee of Lord Krishna and submissively accepts the teachings of Lord Krishna without misinterpretation, he becomes situated in this neutral stage of devotional service. So we heard Shanta, Srila Prabhupada points out it means saintly, not just neutral, saintly. And he says here, the qualifications of a saintly person are described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as follows. A saintly person is one who understands fully that simply by discharging devotional service, he can become confident of liberation. So liberation is a core theme for those spiritualists. He is always situated in the regulative principles of devotional life and at the same time aspires to be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person thinks like this: when shall I be able to live alone in the caves of the mountains? When shall I be dressed simply with undergarments? When shall I be satisfied by eating simply a little fruit and vegetables? When will it be possible for me to think always of the lotus feet of Mukunda, who is the source of the Brahman effulgence? When, in such a spiritual condition of life, shall I fully understand my days and nights to be insignificant moments in eternal time? So we see, these spiritualists are concerned with letting go of material existence per se and attaining the liberation, but also not in an impersonal sense, but wanting to be liberated with Krishna, or Mukunda is mentioned here. And we hear in the Nectar of Devotion that also this different type of devotees, they experience all types of ecstasies, intense emotions. It's not rather a contemplative state only, or philosophically engaging in transcendence. No, they have concrete experiences. You could call it sensual experiences, mental and physical experiences that relate to this connection they have to Vishnu. And it said, those who are situated on the platform of Shantarasa get their impetus for advancement in devotional service by smelling the tulasi offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, by hearing the sound of his conch shell, we will hear more of that, by seeing the sanctified place in some mountain or hill, by observing a forest like the ones in Vrindavan, by going to a place of pilgrimage, by visiting the course of the Ganges river, by being victorious over the dictations of bodily demands, by understanding the devastation of eternal time, and by constantly associating with devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness. All these different items are favorable to elevating saintly persons situated in Shantarasa to the advanced stage of devotional service. And here, some Srila Prabhupada translates and adds also more examples. Krishna's conch shell is called Panchajanya, and when he blew that conch shell in Kurukshetra, it sounded as so far that surrounding caves where certain mystics and yogis were sitting, they could hear that conch shell. And as described here, they reacted immediately, being awakened from their trance of meditation, they immediately saw that the hairs of their bodies were standing. Sometimes devotees in Shantaras become stunned. Jagannath Baladev Subhachudeva ki jai, Shri Gauritai ki jai. Peaceful, jubilant, deliberate, reflective, anxious, dexterous, and argumentative. These symptoms indicate continuous ecstasy or established emotion. So something quite intense is happening there on this level. And here another example is given when a great mystic was once awakened from his meditative trance by hearing the vibration of Krishna's Panchajanya, conch shell. The mystic became overpowered. So much so, in fact, that he began to bash his head on the ground, and with eyes full of tears of ecstatic love, he violated all the rules and regulations of his yoga performances. Thus he at once neglected the process of Brahman realization. So I found these descriptions, I find them nice, particularly the sound of Krishna's conch shell, like what it creates, that it creates such an intense ecstasy. You might also understand like how maybe the Pandavas and all of those felt like on the battlefield when Krishna was blowing his conch shell, leave alone seeing him. It's also some descriptions say that also Krishna on the battlefield manifested his Narayan form for fighting, because it would also suit the mood. But he's also, of course, there as Krishna. So this is a description of the basis of the relationships, because the shloka here was pointing to the attainment of transcendental bliss of an intimate relationship with Krishna. And we talked about Arjuna. Arjuna, of course, is not in that category of Shanta. He's considered as a friend. And then the Nectar of Devotion describes further the transcendental affection. That would be what we call the Dasya Ras. And for example, Shukadev Goswami considers that part of the Shantaras, but then Sridhar Swami is saying, okay, no, this is an extra established form of relationship, and in which there's also, affectionate service. And then, for example, also demigods, like in the material world, demigods are considered, like if they're on a certain level, that they want to serve Krishna in that kind of capacity. And then comes that what we call the Sakya Rasa, of friendship, and where Arjuna is being situated. And he's his dear friend, Krishna says, and in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada writes, how the sons of Pandu, the Pandavas, enjoy Krishna's association is described as follows. When Sri Krishna arrived in Indraprastha, the capital of the Kurus, Maharaj Yudhishthira immediately came out to smell the flavor of Krishna's head. It is the Vedic custom that a superior smells the heads of his subordinates, when the subordinates offer respect to the superior by touching his feet. Similarly, Arjuna and Bhima embraced Krishna with great jubilation, and the two younger brothers, namely Nakula and Sahadev, touched the lotus feet of Krishna with tears in their eyes and offered their respects. In this way, all the 5 Pandava brothers enjoyed the fraternal friendship of Krishna in transcendental mellow. Of the 5 Pandavas, Arjuna is the most intimately connected with Krishna. He has a nice bow called Gandiva in his hand. His thighs are compared to the trunks of elephants, and his eyes are always reddish. When Krishna and Arjuna are together on a chariot, they become celestial beauties, pleasing to the eyes of everyone. It is said that once Arjuna was lying on his bed with his head upon Krishna's lap, and was talking and joking with Krishna in great relaxation, enjoying Krishna's company with smiling and great satisfaction. So we hear there they were not just like also friends in terms of they met at some point and became friends. They even were friends on a, let's say, family relationship basis. You know, we know King Ugrasena, like, fathered Kunti Devi and also Vasudeva, so they were brother and sister. From Vasudeva, Devaki, Krishna took birth, like became the son, and from Kunti side, Arjuna. So they were cousins. And we know, maybe you also, probably, I don't know, possibly you have cousins. And you can see the relationship is different than with a sibling. If you have a sister or brother, it's often a bit different. But with cousins, my experience also, it has a different flavor also. And it has also something very often supportive or nice. But of course it depends on the person. So you can also be with cousins that you can't stand so, but essentially. So they were cousins, and they had, in this regard also in their rasa and in this pastime, they had a bond like this. And Arjuna, the name Arjuna means one of pure deeds, or one who performs pure deeds. And this doesn't seem always like this. Krishna also, we know he had a sister, or has a sister, Subhadra. And once the arrangement was, Balaram was interested to marry Subhadra to Duryodhana, since he was in favor of Duryodhana. He was one of his favorite students in mace fighting, so he had some affection for him. But Krishna and also Vasudeva, they were not in favor of that marriage arrangement. And also Arjuna wanted to have Subhadra as his wife. So he did something which is in the Vedic context highly irreligious, but he did it for the purpose of, or like that was what he chose to do. So in the rainy season, it is that the sannyasis, they stay at one place, they don't travel. They would be just Chaturmasya, this period, so then they stay in one place. So he decided to go to Dwaraka, where also Subhadra Devi is staying and Balaram is staying. And he wanted to devise a plan how to get close and how to finally get married to her. And he decided, I will dress up as a sannyasi and stay there for this time, for this Chaturmasya time. So interestingly, no one detected him. They tried the same thing with Jarasandha, but they were detected. They also dressed like kind of sannyasis, brahmanas, but like their arms and everything, that it revealed them, but there was some yoga maya potency, obviously, that Arjuna remained undetected, even by Balaram. So, and it's the practice, of course, the sannyasis are being fed or like being provided with sumptuous food by the householders. And also once Balaram invited Arjuna as a sannyasi to his home and to feed him sumptuously. And often when I read that, as a side note, I always think as a sannyasi you have much more struggle with eating, so to say, than some normal householder. Like in this connection, everyone feeds you all the time. And I wonder, how do they remain, how do they create their balance, if we just always read sumptuous food and they were fed. They were like, you imagine the sannyasis kind of as, quite massive. So Balaram served him, and Subhadra was also around. And it said she had her temperament was a bit more like she was like, wie sagt man, unbeschwert auf Englisch, carefree, being not so strictly Vedic and everything. So she was also being kind of relaxed and smiled to the sannyasi in a friendly way, Arjuna. And Arjuna, it's described, he could not look to Subhadra. He was getting his food and he was looking at Subhadra, and his eyes were sparkling and getting brighter the more he saw her, and he got more full of desire. And also she reciprocated. She also felt attracted to this man there as a sannyas, perhaps knowing it's Arjuna. So it was quite obvious, apparently, that Arjuna was very interested in her. And at some point, when Subhadra decided to go on a chariot, and they do this kind of, like when they go to the temple, obviously, like also the princess was carried by a chariot. So Arjuna decided to capture her, kidnapping. Yes, kidnapping. Sorry. And he asked Vasudeva and Devaki for their blessings, and they gladly gave him the blessings, because they thought, no, not Duryodhana, So, and then he seized her, like it's said, compared like a lion taking his prey, and then moved about with this Gandiva bow, fought off all the soldiers that were ordered to hold him back. And so in this way, he got away with Subhadra, and also, yes. But what happened is Balaram got quite angry about that, and Balaram was very angry. That's dangerous. And here comes what really touched me when I read that, how Krishna is a friend of Arjuna. And we said before, friends means you have each other's back, you support, there's some loyalty. And Krishna pleaded to Balaram by falling at his feet, saying, "Don't be angry at Arjuna, please forgive him." And then told him, actually Subhadra also wants him, so kind of. And Balaram was, okay, he could appreciate that also Subhadra was actually interested in Arjuna, and let go of all anger, and on the contrary, rather immediately arranged for all kinds of presents and stuff for the marriage, so they were blessed. So I felt that it's such a beautiful example for also the friendship that was going on between Krishna and Arjuna, that they really stuck together, they support each other, and yes. And that's something we are supposed to attain on the long run, whenever this will be, but that we also have a eternal, intimate relationship with Krishna, and to have that in mind when we do our practice and service, that at the end this is something that is awaiting us, I think. So that's all I got to say. We can open up for comments, questions. Yes.
I was reading this pastime just recently, and I was thinking about this verse in Bhagavad-Gita, Apichetsu Duracharo. You know how, because he said he did something highly irreligious, but it's Arjuna, and Krishna protects him because he's pure devotee. But what he does is really controversial. So it's a really nice example of what Krishna explains, that even if you do the most abominable act, if you're situated in Krishna consciousness.
Yes, thank you. You can also see whether there's something. Can we pass the microphone?
I have a question. Thank you very much. I was meditating on the translation of this verse, which talks about how intimate relationship with Krishna can be built through service, and that also gives us pleasure, something along this line. And somehow since morning today we've been reading about service, because today's quote, Prabhupada is about service, and happiness derived from service, and service should be based on love. And then we were reading Nectar of Devotion, it was again about happiness derived from service, and it's also something I was personally thinking about the past few weeks. And yes, when we are trying to be Krishna consciousness, we do sometimes come across these moments when there is so much happiness in service. And so, yes, you feel like, oh yes, I want to serve more. But then I read something many months ago, and I really kind of, this comes to my mind every time I think, oh, service is so blissful. I read from His Holiness Shivaram Swami Maharaj in Chant More. He says that service per se cannot be a signifier of your increase in devotion or bhakti. It may be that you are simply dutiful. So that was quite a piercing statement, that maybe you're just dutiful and your devotion is not increasing. And then I also heard from His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj, where he said that what matters is the increase in your devotion, not the increase in service. And then I was thinking that, how does this thing really work? Like maybe sometimes when we want to serve more, or we just feel dutiful, or just maybe even working on the mode of passion and it's not out of love. So if you could maybe just share your thoughts on this. Thank you.
All right. I really like that statement, that it's not about increase of service, but increase of devotion within the service given. And I think this is very telling, that actually captures quite an essential point, where we would say maybe in other terms, it's not about the quantity and the quality in which I do something. And also Krishna makes the statements, he even says, whatever facilities you have, there might be very little. Where, for example, says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yomi Bhakti Pranashiti, and so that what is given is not so much of significance, but how it is given is of significance. And I think also, a lot of service can be sometimes, I might dare to say, a contrary effect on the devotees, that they're rather a bit distressed and perhaps even kind of averse, because feel like, oh my God, I'm working and working and working, kind of like this, and don't really feel nourished necessarily because of maybe wherever one stands, one's consciousness. One thought also comes to my mind is that the service ideally matches also one's nature and we could call talents or gifts or natural qualities. I think if we can bring ourselves in the way we are, or like where we are naturally also fit in, or like work well, that also has a different effect of how much devotion we can do it. At the same time, depending also again from how you look at it, you can also say, I don't mind, any service for me is acceptable as long as I can do something for Krishna. So I have also both experiences. Sometimes I could say also, when I was also living for some while in the temple right in the beginning, then it was like for a year also here. And sometimes it was like any kind of service is fine and I really do it. And then in other times it's no, this particular service would make me, happy, or like at least stimulate my, what I could call, devotion. Because there we are all a bit individual. But let's go back to the statement. It's not so much about increase of service, but increase of devotion within the service one does.
I just had a small contemplation on this, if you allow me. Because I was thinking that sometimes even when we are engaging in service, and service is also a means of, let's say, maintaining that relationship with Krishna. It's already there, but also you serve and to reawaken love, but to also express love to Krishna. And then I sometimes really think that how do you even know if there is love in this? And maybe we cannot answer such a question, but it's just.
I think I know where you're heading to. This kind of contemplating this question, searching for, perhaps in a service I don't really feel something particular, and then I do things, and perhaps it goes toward feeling really alive, and at least, or like being feelingly. Sometimes Prabhupada uses this word feelingly, doing something for Krishna, and sometimes perhaps we don't see or perceive ourselves as so feelingly when we do that, and then we wonder. And at the moment, what is my experience? I think we have to find where our feelings are. At the moment, I'm much more into, since I do some particular training, which is for therapy purposes, but there's a lot about poetry, and not just reading poetry, but also practicing to write it yourself. You don't have to be like a great poet, but kavi, or like the quality of being a poet, is also Vaishnava quality. Our acharyas have beautiful poetry. And I found myself in there with like consciously finding words to also express or glorify or like contemplate or connect. This gave me some feelingly kind of state of mind, like to also write something for Krishna, let's say a prayer. And for others it might be a different service, but to also seek, where do I have a resonance, an emotional resonance with what I do, and try to nourish that. And some of the service I do to people is not devotees also, but like since I work with people, supporting them on the psychological level, I felt also a service that really is something where I feel I can do that with love, or like with some, at least with a strong feeling behind that. And there was some devotees made up a group. They call it devotee doctors. A bit like with this title, doctor. Okay, but it's about professionals like being available there, and if some people like devotees who have gone through difficult or heavy situations can approach them, like kind of a pro bono service. And I felt that's something that resonated, and let me offer whatever I have as a gift, as a support to those people, and this way serve, which comes naturally. And I think that everyone has his or her particular equipment, so to speak, mentally or physically, and then and to find that and to connect with that, I think that would be, in my opinion, a key to also see like your devotion. But yeah, maybe others can.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I want to also share a lesson that Krishna taught me about service, just to try to continue on the same topic. Last year I had a lot of service editing Guru Maharaj's book about Srila Prabhupada. I was really blissful, so at Seva, and I was doing it very gladly, but and there was a lot of ego in my Seva. I was feeling like I know how to do it best, and I'm so happy, I'm achieving something, and this and that. And I wasn't noticing it at all. Till I finished what I had to do. I was supporting the editors, and I sent the file. And I was so happy that I achieved, it was many months' work. And I sent it, and the editor, she wrote to me, thank you, Mamaji, but it looks a little funny. I was like, what do you mean it looks funny? Maybe how many pages it was, maybe 200 pages, like real nice text, everything organized, and titles, subtitles, everything so nicely laid out. And she told me, she sent me a screenshot, and I was like, that does look funny. I opened the file went corrupt, and it went corrupt in a very, very funny way. So it looked like demons took apart the text, mixed up the lines completely. And the Sanskrit that I was mainly working on, putting all the critical marks, it was messed up quite a bit. But the funniest thing was some of the lines of the Sanskrit were perfectly intact, but all the words of Krishna, imagine how many times Krishna would be mentioned in this book. All of Krishna, just words were gone. It was replaced with some gibberish, like completely impossible to read, So, like Krishna was gone from the book,
Wow.
It was really heartbreaking. I had to work on it for a few more months to redo everything. But I realized I wasn't surrendered completely. I was doing it from the ego, and I was like feeling so dependent on devotees, and like really trying to support them rather than do something myself. And I found that experience really, really, really purifying.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's quite, I can imagine it's quite an intense moment, I guess. When you have all that and then it's all gone. Like, well, I hope everything turns out in a good way.
Heart change, that's the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I also want to say something about service.
That's the theme today.
So somehow I had a lot of service in Bangladesh, and too much. and devotees, they say that when we chant, we actually chant for service, and that's very good. But sometimes you can also get lost in the service, and that's the part where I agree with you, not agree, but like have the same experience that you have to see where you are and like where your emotions are. And I like the statement of Niranjana Swami, because he says that the devotional service is an internal endeavor. So actually it's more a meditation, like prayer, contemplation on Krishna, and there is where this feeling like comes from. And what I like about it is that then there are no material impediments in devotional service, which means that even if you are physically handicapped, you cannot do anything, you can still perform devotional service. Even if you cannot speak, you can, you can't chant it, you can. I mean, there are people who are deaf and
is this kind of mute? No?
Yeah, and
What is it?
and
Stumm?
they're also devotees.
Taubstumm?
there is one person in Croatia who's like that, and I was like, I asked my mentor, like, how does this person chant, like, in the mind, actually? There's no impediment. And the point is that whatever we do, we can do with meditation on Krishna. So it would be wonderful one day that even when we brush our teeth, and even when we shower, actually it's a performance of devotional service, because we have this consciousness that this body belongs to Krishna, I didn't do this, so then everything in a day is, so that's quite nice. And I try to do that because I overdo it with these services, and then I am in the mode of passion because I have this increase. But then it's like you calm yourself down and then you see where you are actually. And these feelings are very important, because bhakti is all about feeling. Just want to
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yes, it's a nice point. Also remember, when we do little things, or little, I mean, it's always relative. For example, going to the temple and you prepare yourself. Let's say you take a shower, you iron your clothes, or like and put tea like into all these kind of upfront activities. Yeah, if they're done like with the spirit, because I want to look proper, so to say, in front of the deity. That's it's devotional service or something to take care of yourself and everything. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, to have this contemplation. Every little thing is then connected. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Is there anything else? We still have kind of 4 minutes, I think.
Thank you. I was just thinking on the question, regarding the service and the devotion, and I thought that what could be helpful is these stages of what we go through. The bhajana kriya, there will be certain way how we will be engaging in devotional service, and there will be certain experiences of what we can actually get there. And then anartha nivritti, going to be doing service, but it's going to be tough as nails. Sometimes we'll have some glimpse, sometimes not. And then, I just thought that it's not always the same, depending where we are. But the idea is that in either case, we are servants of Krishna, servants of the servants of the servants. So we're going to be doing service, but at this stage, service is purifying. We don't do it because out of love so much. I mean, it would be nice. We know it's purifying. So of course, these things that you mentioned, because when you have to do something over years, you need to find something which keeps you going. So service according to our nature, balance, taking care of our needs, that's all necessary. And then once there is the transformation, then we are doing service, out of those nice things. I just thought that if we add those...
the stages. Maybe a short comment for the end for that. If you talk of stages, we all had our beginning, when we came to know Krishna consciousness. Perhaps we joined a temple, perhaps we were part of a community and visiting. But there was always something, a beginning spark, something that caught us, something that oh my God, since this corona thing, I have issues sometimes finding words. It's really annoying. You're with me, huh? Being either fascination or whatever. So that's there. And there's also a strategy that we might find sometimes, I guess, in self-help books. But for me, it came also something that I have in mind often. Sometimes because also you mentioned you get lost in service and so on, like to really go back some steps, or wait a second, when I started this whole thing, what was it actually that really that captured me? And try to go back to the initial also inspiration, and in this way reconnect to that, and then again, okay, how to say, okay, stop. Yeah, do you know what I mean? I guess. All right, thank you very much. Shri Caitanya-caritāmṛta ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.